that would be zero. But if you die 24 hours later, you can lose over half your estate because it kicks back up to over 50%. So somebody said the motto of that story, if you're a certain age, don't spend New Year's Eve that year with the kids. Might prove to be a little dangerous. But there's a more serious notion here, and that is that not only the tax code is messed up, but we're treating people unfairly in terms of what we take from them and the effect that it has, not on rich people, but on people who work hard all their lives and put their money back into their farm or into their business. Those are all things before us. We need to do a lot better. But I always get back to the fundamentals. You don't always have a chance to talk about everything, everywhere. You got to know what a person's priorities are. And my priorities are security, and prosperity, and the unity of this country. To me, everything revolves around that. Now, the president can have an opinion about a lot of things. The president ought to use the bully pulpit for constructive purposes. But when it comes right down to it, we're going to be honest about it. Those are the things that a president has got to be solid on. On the security issue, when I look around me, I'm not sure that we've come to terms as a nation with the fact that we're in a global conflict and have been for some time, and we're going to be for some time, of which Iraq and Afghanistan are the current front, because that's where we've drawn the line. We will have it wherever we choose to draw the line. And as we look at that landscape and we see the progress that's being made, you know, we've got hope and optimism that we can provide some stability before we get out of there, and everybody wants to get out of there as soon as they reasonably can. But those who would push and put legislation on the table designed to do nothing more than to show to everybody around the world how disunited we are, how bickering we are on the details of this thing. Hopefully keep in mind this, that the most important thing we need to do is to show the world that we're not weak, and that fundamentally on the basic things we're not divided. Because regardless of what decisions are made in Iraq, that's going to send a message that's going to make it much, much more dangerous to live in this country. We will pay a heavy price for that down the road. So we've got to send the message to the world that we're willing and able to do what's necessary to win in any front that we're confronted with by Al-Qaeda and by radical Islam. These folks look at this thing as having gone on a few hundred years. They're willing for it to go a few hundred years more and kill a few million innocent people along the way. Serious, serious business. People say, well, it's 9/11, and we've kind of forgotten about that. Let's talk about something more often. Unfortunately, we are talking about the future. We are talking about the future. And we've got to make sure we do everything, whether it's from a military standpoint, our intelligence standpoint, our alliances standpoint, freedom-loving people around the world, making sure we're on the same page, making sure we're wiser in the future by going into places where we know what we're doing. The cause was just. There's no question about it, and successful. We were not prepared for what we found. We need to make sure we never do that again. Didn't have the right strategy. I think we're on the right track now. On prosperity, I have a radical notion that I've been tossing out here lately, and that is, let's continue to do what works and quit doing what doesn't work. What's working? The tax cuts for this economy. This administration inherited an economy that was going into recession. It had the meltdown of the high technology bubble, had the scandals on Wall Street that depressed everybody, and, of course, most importantly, September 11th. All reasons to really, really hurt this economy. The administration put in tax cuts in 2001, 2003. We've had growth ever since. Economic growth, encouraging people to do the things that we all say we want to do more of. Work hard, save, invest, provide jobs, all of which the government incidentally can tax again and has been getting more revenue than they ever got before. It's worked. That's what we need to keep doing. That's what we need to preserve against the best efforts of the other side. Because they want to do away with those tax cuts let people slide into the alternative minimum tax and pay more taxes on what you invest and dividends that you get from your investments and all of that. What's not working is that at the same time, we're locked into a spending pattern, both locked in automatic, what they call mandatory spending, our retirement programs and other programs, as well as the discretionary side where you get all of the pork barrel foolishness going on and things of that nature. That's going to lead us down the road to bankruptcy. We are spending the money of children and grandchildren who have not been born yet and who do not have a seat at the table. And nobody wants to talk about it or deal with it because when they say, well, what are you going to do? A lot of things we can do. First thing we've got to do is come together as Democrats and Republicans and realize that we can't do this to our own legacy. We can't do this to our own people. There are reasonable things that can be done without hurting anybody. But we got to do them in a common sense way, and we got to do them now instead of waiting till the roof falls in, and it's more difficult for everybody. The third part of that stool I mentioned a while ago is unity. If you looked at Congress, you'd think there was no possibility of any such thing ever again. Fighting over all things large and small. Congress approval ratings now up to about 11%, I think. They deserve every percent of it. But we need to keep in mind that there have been times in our history, in our country's history, where we've come together, took on tough jobs, hitched up our britches, got the job done, remembered that there's more things that united us than divided us, done the job, and come out wiser and stronger. We have a heritage. We have a history of honor and sacrifice for the greater good. We're proud of that history. We've shed more blood for the freedom of other peoples than any other country in the history of the world. We're proud of that. It's led to us being the greatest country. But that carries with it certain obligations. And part of those obligations have to do with making sure that it stays up. That we leave this country in better shape than when we entered it. That's our obligation. We must take the leadership in making sure that that happens, not only for our benefit and those immediately around us, because of the legacy that we're leaving. It's up to us to do this in the leadership. And if we do that, adhering to the principles that made us great and made us successful, I don't care what the pundits are saying about next year's election now, we will be successful in next year's election. And I think that gives us an opportunity to do some wonderful things for the United States of America. And that's what it's all about. And I appreciate very much your being here today and listening to me give my thoughts about it. Now we'll, first of all, could I have a round of applause? Well, I had to drag that out of you, but now that we have, let's talk about what you want to talk about. Anybody got an answer? Yes, sir.
A philosophical question. It has been said that, quote, eventually all paper money becomes worthless. We have some presidential thoughts on that.
All paper money what?
Eventually becomes worthless.
No, I don't subscribe to that theory. It depends on what's behind it. You know, we got off the gold standard, I guess, in the 70s, and a lot of people said, you know, that's the direction that we're headed in. But I think as long as the United States government stands strong behind its currency, that's not going to happen. We see it now. Nations across the world becoming our creditors and causing concern when it gets to a certain level. I mean, the Chinese, for example, are holding more of our paper, I guess, second largest holder of our paper than any other country. And this brings up other questions. But I think for the most part, the rest of the world looks upon U.S. currency as the standard, and that as long as the United States is perceived to be as strong as it is, and as prosperous as it is, and willing to stand behind its currency, that it will remain that way. Yes, sir.
This is kind of a difficult question, I know. None of the candidates so far wanted to speak about